Guys, one of the major decisions in Chapter 16, and for any managerial accountant, would be, whether or not we need to process something to the point where it might provide us with more profit, right? So these are decisions that are often made. And one of the topics in Chapter 16 is like whether or not we process maybe an item that we have that's coming out of the ground, whether we go ahead and sell it as is, right? Or do we go ahead and process it further? So that's what this first problem here, 1612, is all about. And I want you to see here that alpha is what they pulled out of the ground, okay? And they have separated this, 60% of it, into delta. It's a product, right? And they're just kind of calling it that. Right? And then they have a product called pi here that 40% of it went into. So all we're doing here is making a column, guys, for delta here and for pi here, okay? And we're just kind of taking part of this total amount of tonnage and separating the two. That's all we're doing, okay? Because in A, it actually asks us, if should delta and pi, as it is sold, be what we need to sell, or should we refine these two products even further, okay? So when we to make that decision, they come up with this terminology in the chapter, so I want to kind of talk about it just a little bit. They talk about a differential cost analysis. And guys, don't be intimidated, by that word. Like differentiation simply means to differentiate between two things, right? So what we're doing is we're taking the incremental selling price, the incremental cost, and the incremental profit by processing delta into super delta. So if you say it's differential, we're just going to take two things and compare the two. What is incremental? Well, it's that part of it that increases, right? So if we process delta into delta, super delta, right, then it can be sold for $12. But if we just leave it at delta, it can be sold for $6. So really the more profit that you would make on processing to super delta would be an additional $6 per ton. But then look at this. This is a number they give us. This 1,680,000 here divided by the whole 210 tons of delta, right, is the cost of processing it further. And it turns out that that's $8 per ton. So the incremental profit then is $2 on that. And we go down here, the same thing, a differential cost analysis for precision pi. What if we took this pi product right here and we processed it further? Well, look, we can get $10 more, not $6 more, but $10 more if we process pi into precision pi. So we got that $10, and you'll see here divided by 140 amount of tonnage. These are your costs. So it's going to cost about $8 per ton. So that's going to give us an incremental profit of $2, right? So this company, you understand, may make the decision to go ahead and process pi into precision pi, but to go ahead and just sell delta as is. Okay, that would be kind of the decision that was made. Now, understand that the $675,000 cost you incurred to actually pull the alpha ore out of the ground is what the chapter would refer to as a sunk cost. I mean, this has really nothing to do with the decision at hand, the decision being made as to what to do with the product once it's pulled out of the ground. Okay, so that's how much the cost that was, but that is considered a sunk cost. But if you go down here and you'll see under sales, guys, if we go ahead and sell delta for $6, we sell precision pi, not pi, but precision pi for $25. they're going to pull this much revenue, and we're going to have production cost involved, like that initial sunk cost you have to include here as a cost, and then that cost of processing pie further, right, has to be added to it. So if you wash that cost out, then you've got basically a profit, gross profit type number here, a maximum profit of 2,965,000 based on your decision to sell a highly processed item, but not sell a highly processed other item. Okay, so I just wanted that problem. Once I put it on the board, usually in a class that I'm teaching like in live, and I kind of explain it how I just did with you guys. I mean, they get it. It's not a really overwhelming problem. As a matter of fact, a lot of these problems in chapter 16, they kind of look wordy and big, but once you do and work one or two, you're like, oh, these aren't bad at all. Actually, they just common sense is what they are. Let's look at some more common sense down here at 1614, where, guys, you have a Sherlock company where it's making locks and they're selling those locks, um, you know, at a price of like $31 per lock or something. And they have a cost per lock of $23.25. And so what they're asking you is we've got this offer to make and sell a whole bulk of new sales here if we can sell them in bulk. So they're going to buy 12,000 locks from us. Do we want to take this order on? Okay. Now understand that if we just looked at the 23, 25 right here, we just said there's no way, because they're offering us on those 12,000 locks $16.25. It's not a whole lot of money. But if you take out the variable expense and you get a contribution margin per unit of 285, now remember, this variable expense, guys, is what really becomes relevant. So what's relevant is how much contribution will this contribute to the bottom line? And the answer is the contribution margin per unit times the number of units. So that means we're going to increase our contribution margin. That's the amount that goes toward our fixed expenses and our operating income. And that is 34,200. So should we pick up, at least from a numbers perspective, this sale? Well, it'll increase our bottom line 34,000. So the answer practically would probably be yes. But listen, there are a lot of things to have to consider. And I want you to know and understand that if you could run afoul of a violation of federal price discrimination if you're not careful, there are laws out there that keep you from selling at such a volume price, such a incredibly small price comparatively, that it would be kind of unfair to your distributors. Now, also understand too, guys, that if you're selling to your distributors at a price somewhere above 23.25, which is where your cost, you say, is, and you all of a sudden start selling to somebody for $16.25, you're going to go to an association conference somewhere, and that's going to get talked about. So your distributors are going to find out you're selling the same lock to someone else for quite a few dollars cheaper. So you have to accept and understand that this might not be, numbers wise, this might be a good decision to increase your bottom line, but is it a good decision in the long run? So what I like for MBAs to do is just kind of ponder the fact that just because the numbers look positive doesn't necessarily involve all the factors in decision making for something like this. If you take on these relatively low amount of revenues per lock, you very well could mess up the sales that you have now. So in any way that were to happen, you would want to be very careful because of your long range planning and the perception that your lock is worth that kind of money or not. You have to be careful with that kind of decision making. Then we'll scroll down here to 1616. Now, this is a fun one. This is one where Rainbow Cruises. I just saw the Rambo advertisement on TV. But Rainbow Cruises, right? It's got a question that they're trying to decide on. Okay, here, and they have at present now they have a selling price and a cost for each one of their people who go on a cruise. All right, so they're selling them for $1,500, and the cost is $1,200, and so that means they have basically a profit margin of $300. So if you take that $300 and divide it by the $1,500, you're going to get a 20% current profit margin is what you're getting. But see, what happens is another company comes along and says, look, I'm going to be able to do this as a selling price of $1,250, not $1,500. So your competitor, is going to be able to sell for cheaper. So can you figure out how much your cost needs to be dropped in order to maintain the same profit margin of 20%? Well, you can do that by taking right here your new selling price and subtracting out 20% of that new selling price. And that, of course, is going to be $1,000. So you're going to have to drop your cost then from $1,200 down to $1,000. And you'll see that worked out down here, you see. And so your target cost reduction is going to be $200, right? So listen, how can a cruise line bring down the cost of their cruise by $200? Well, you know, a lot of cruise lines are now requiring people to spend money, right, when they go on these excursions and stuff, and they may have to increase that. They may have to go to well liquor only is free instead of the getting name brand liquor. They may resort to, putting the wrong kind of liquor in the wrong kind of bottle in order to save money, but that would be dishonest, wouldn't it? But I've actually seen that done. I worked for an establishment for 3 hours that was swapping out Tanqueray, Taka gin, for Tanqueray gin. And they were actually pouring the Taka gin into the Tanqueray bottle in order to sell cheap gin for a premium price. Lasted 3 hours at that place and I was gone. So anyway, don't tell everybody now that your professor at Mississippi College used to do a little bartending when he was young. But that's a past life. But understand too that this is an interesting problem, and this cost reduction can be difficult. That $200 cost reduction per person. They may have a buffet that has crab legs, and all of a sudden we can't afford that anymore. So they've got to do something. Now this other competitor company, can you keep your price at $1,500 and then kind of differentiate yourself from what they're doing? Well, you could do that and not have to drop your price to $1,250. But this is the managerial numbers application to the decision. But there's a whole lot that goes into these management decisions, guys. It goes well beyond the accounting numbers. So and that's kind of my emphasis in this chapter anyway. So anyway, that covers those three, and we'll continue in the next video.